welcome back. Man, we got a good show for you today. Education. Oh man, do I know about education? I taught for 35 years. But today, you're going to see a behind-the-scenes look at education. We have an educator who is now working with some of the programs and some of the things that we need to address. My name is Dacquino. Her name is Dr. Deborah Harding.
Nice to be here.
Deborah, it is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Talk to me a little bit about who you are, what you've done, and what you're doing.
Loaded question, but I'm Dr. Deborah Harding. I'm a former director of K-12 school counseling.
Okay.
Now the title used to be known as guidance counseling, right? So it changed, new modern era. And about 2 years ago, I left the public school system after being involved for about 23 to 25 years. I don't want to date myself. And decided to go out and support actually school counselors in professional development. It was time to search a new journey instead of just being placed in one location. So as I exited and started my new journey, I got several phone calls, tons of phone calls from parents and students saying, could you please guide us on the college process?
So guidance counselors need guidance.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We all do, right?
Yeah, we do.
And from that journey, I got career counseling requests, college counseling requests, academic requests. What do I need to graduate? Those kinds of questions. And hence, guided consulting was created. So now I meet with students, families, educators privately in my office in Mayapack.
Wow, interesting. I taught for 30 years, and then there was this new surge, and that was teacher centers.
Right.
And they said, look, teachers need training too.
Correct.
And so many things are changing, and we need to address some of these programs. We need to address today's children. Right. And some of our programs were dated. They were back in the day. So the state created these teacher centers throughout New York State. And we actually met 3 or 4 times a year where we would get together and we'd say, okay, what's happening and are we addressing it? What do we need to do? We even set up programs for master's programs for teachers who were ready to move into the administrative role. Deborah, what made you say, okay, time to move?
Well, a couple of things. One, New York State Education Department was changing the regulations related to school counseling. So there's something called a National Comprehensive School Counseling Program, which is similar to curriculum that teachers follow, but this is geared towards the school counselors. And as that was being implemented and mandated into the state, and every school now has to do it by July 2019, the calls kept coming in. We know you co-authored the regulations with a group of people at the state level, so how can you help us and guide us? And as a matter of fact, I've been getting more and more calls from schools saying, can you come help us write this document and sort of organize what we do to service better students from a academic, social, emotional, college and career perspective. So that's what really started making me go out and do that. And then from there, still servicing students and families.
Yeah, one of the things that drove me nuts is that, you get these educational mandates and they say, okay, from now on, we're going to do this.
Yes.
And everybody goes, how are we supposed to do this?
Yes.
Sometimes the finance isn't there and the training isn't there.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, a teacher is responsible for something he or she never did before.
Right.
And they say, how do I do this? Well, that was what I had to do, was I had to figure out now, how do I get someone who does know how to do that to teach them so that they can teach the children?
Correct. And I think that's a big issue right now because the school counselors are in isolation of the classroom. So think about that. We know education as classroom teachers and administrators.
Right.
We forget about everybody else that makes up the school district in some shape or form. So now those professional student support staff members are rising to the occasion, and they need their own professional development also.
What we're doing right here is a classic example. People out there are watching us on the screen,
Right.
and they're watching what we're doing. But if not for the cameraman, and the people in the control room,
Absolutely.
this would not be
Nothing
happening.
would happen, right?
You know, and so there has to be someone behind the scenes.
Correct.
And someone who is aware of what is going on in that classroom. And you are, obviously.
Yep.
And now, so you're not directly affiliated with the schools, or you are?
No, I'm independent now. I have my own office where I will meet just like a therapist or psychologist. I'm a school counselor with my own office. Yeah, and I work as a consultant, and I have a nice space where I can bring people in and do training there away from the district so they're not interrupted, or I can meet with them one-on-one. But I do travel a lot to different school districts, as well as the BOCES, you know, your hubs that you were talking about, and I do professional development at their locations.
Yeah. That's, I mean, one of my big jobs was to find people like you.
Yeah.
And I had to go out there and say, hey, do you know what the state's talking about?
Correct.
Because we don't.
Correct.
And, you know, and then I would have to set up workshops and pull teachers out of class, you know, and have them come in to see exactly what is happening.
Right. And I think looking at what's happening in your own district is much better than just going to a
because
workshop.
It differs. It does differ.
Yes, culture is very different. Students are different. The needs are different. And you have staff members who are looking for specific things that are related to maybe just career counseling and what tools do I use, what technology systems.
One of the most amazing things, as part of my job, I had to be a SAVE instructor. That's a School Against Violence in Education.
Yes.
Well, that was a program that then became legislation. So SAVE legislation means you do it because if you don't, it's against the law.
Correct.
So they had this whole set of regulations that some people understood and some people didn't. And there were very strict rules. And one of the things I discovered quickly is that SAVE legislation was a New York regulation.
Correct.
But New York City and Hawkinsville, New York, are so different.
Very different.
You know, all these different school districts had different things. So they would set up, they'd say, okay, here's the rules. If a man with a gun or a woman enters the building, here's what you do.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's one thing if you're in a cornfield, and it's another thing if you're in the middle of Manhattan. So it's a whole different thing. So someone had to be able to say, okay, look, here's what you have to do first, then second, then third. And that doesn't just come naturally. Someone has to know how to set all those things up. So I imagine that's what you do.
Exactly. So when I'm working with a school district, for example, or an individual student, I have to first find out what's been completed, or I have to find out what works for that district. So I do an audit first, and then let's talk about the school district. And from the audit, I then can say, all right, this is what you're missing. And this is what you need. And that might include, look, the recommendations might be more staff, right? Because what we're finding, or what I'm finding, is that our student caseloads to the current counselors and support systems in schools are very high. So in addition to not just meeting with the students, so for example, my first job as a school counselor, I had 1 to 375 students. So imagine throughout that 10-month period, when was I going to meet with every student individually? And I know that other districts could be as high as 500 and some as low as 100
and it varies by grade
something.
level too, right?
Correct. And so the idea that you have that support system and what are you doing, and then to top it off, you have the managerial work, what we call as non-counseling activities, where we're running meetings, or we're putting out fires, or we're filing paperwork, whatever it might be.
We're talking to a parent for hours.
Correct. And so, you know, you have to understand the parent comes with a student, so you have to really support and listen to them.
They need to work together.
Correct. And that's another piece. We cannot assume that everybody understands the school system, and that's something that I've learned being out of the school, that if I knew back then, I probably would have a different perspective. Not everybody understands the business of school and education, just like I don't understand the business of television or the business of accounting. So I can't consider myself an expert in those fields. So we have to be sensitive to that.
And also sensitive to the fact that our product is children.
Correct.
And one of the things that with the SAVE legislation that I became very aware of is that children don't exist in one domain.
Right.
It
Absolutely.
isn't school. It's community, it's school, it's family, it's self-assessment. All of those things make a whole child.
Right.
So especially a guidance counselor has to be aware. You know, the teacher's concerned that this kid is not doing well in English, but his mother's dying at home.
Right.
Or his grandmother, or their house just burned down.
Or they don't have
Or they
food.
don't have food.
Right.
They're homeless, you know, or this kid is so wealthy that everybody's hitting on him from every direction. So there's a whole lot of things to understand about servicing a whole child.
Absolutely, and it has to. We have to be careful with confidentiality first and
Yep.
foremost, and I think that's what leads us. The second piece is to take all those components and be able to do a great storytelling on every child,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And that storytelling is that team approach with teachers, with administrators, with the nurses, with psychologists, social workers, and outside agencies to say, how can we understand, support, and find success for this child along the way? And that's what makes my vision a tad different,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
I love looking at all components.
Yep. And the other thing that always made me crazy is that we get an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old, and this is a kid who is now going through subjects throughout the day. Gets a math teacher he likes, and then he leaves there after 43 minutes and goes to a social studies teacher he doesn't like, and then or a subject he likes or
Right.
doesn't like. And the day is fragmented. And some of these kids just can't turn it on and off.
Correct.
We as adults don't do that. We
Very
get a
tough.
job, we're doing the same job pretty much most of the day. But you're asking these kids to do things they're not comfortable with, or
Right.
not good at, or very good at, and they're switching every 43
Right.
minutes.
Right.
And some kids just can't do that quickly. Even as teachers, you know, when I had my classes, one of the things I had to understand is that I wasn't teaching a class, I was teaching 23 individuals.
Very difficult to do.
It's very difficult to do.
And I'm sure they
especially-
asked you about differentiation. Are
Yeah,
you right?
of course, always. And you know, and that's one of the things that, you know, it used to be, remember the Pink Floyd Brick in the Wall?
Oh, yeah.
You know, where it was like the factory system.
Yes.
One worksheet worked for every kid in the class.
Right.
And if today was Monday, you were on page 37 of your textbook. But today we're learning that all kids don't learn the same
Correct.
way.
Correct.
And we have to understand that. And we have to be able to understand that we have to look out there and also see children not only as children, but as risk factors.
Right. Right.
There are things out there that are threatening these kids, whether they're too rich or too poor, too hungry or too full. All kids are different. So I would imagine being a counselor anyway is mind-boggling.
You're an empath, as we've been called, and so you sponge all those emotions and events that you just brought up. And by the end of the day, you're exhausted. Exhausted emotionally.
As a teacher,
Yeah.
I was. I mean, and then I had to also change. People don't realize it. My first period English class and my third period English class were two completely different things.
Yeah, and our schedules throughout the day, you know, you have a calendar
Yeah.
that says you're going to meet up with 5 parents or teachers or team meetings, and
Yeah.
if you have one crisis, that whole day is off.
Yeah, I mean, my lunch periods were eating a sandwich in between classes.
You
know?
had lunch periods? Because I didn't have lunch periods. So you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Sometimes we had days where we went without lunch
Yeah.
whatsoever, and by the end of the day, you're just sitting and looking at your desk and saying, oh my gosh, I haven't done all
Yeah.
this paperwork that I need to do or made phone calls.
September was exhausting
Yes.
for me because after getting the summer off and then trying to get back into gear, and the other thing I realized as a teacher that was a revelation, those little peanuts are always 12.
Yes.
And every year I get older.
Yes.
They don't.
They don't.
You know, they're always 12.
Yeah,
Because I
but-
taught 6th grade for years. And 6th and 7th and 8th.
Yeah.
And it was always, you know, and they come in with their energy and their new, new beliefs.
Right.
As the generations
fears.
change. Oh, yeah.
New fears.
And I saw, when I first started teaching, the kids were different.
Yes.
But the world was different. Everything has changed in so many ways. Some things are constant. That is, the children are people too.
Correct.
They're always going to be people. But as the world changes, their needs change.
Correct. And I think one of the things that we're missing in the big picture of education is, and you mentioned it before, finding what makes them tick, right?
Yeah.
Their passion, and then taking that and elaborating it more in their learning process so they can focus on what's going to be my journey after I leave the public school or the charter school or whatever, the K-12 school system. And how do I find that out? And I used to always run reports on, as counselors, we do career inventories in the school setting with kids at a certain grade level in the middle school and then the high school, as well as elementary school. And we used to just have that data sitting there and not really focus much on it because we didn't have time. And here's a great opportunity to collaborate with a teacher and say, hey, what if we taught this course, because most of our kids are interested in business. So,
what do you find is your greatest challenge in this new position?
I don't see anything as a challenge, to be honest, and I don't mean to say it's perfect.
No.
I think every day brings something different, but I couldn't say that one thing per se is a big challenge. Although I will take that back. Let me think back. I think the fact that once you become an independent counselor, an educational consultant, there is this view of you that you are not in the public school system anymore, therefore we're not going to talk to you. And the reality, I think that's a challenge in general, because I'm having had so many years in the public school system and now getting more time with families and educators, there should be this communication. They should see me as an outside agency of support, as opposed to, oh, you're there, I'm here.
Yeah. One of the biggest challenges I had when I became the director of teacher training is helping teachers understand the importance of change.
Correct.
And change is difficult, especially since many teachers who've been in the system a long time have been burned.
Right.
Because a new guru comes in and says, oh no, we've been doing it wrong. This is the way we have to do it from now on.
The vision.
So you get these new people with the new vision.
Right.
And they're all set and they're ready to go. And people say, you know what? Next month you're going to have me change to something else.
Correct.
I'm staying where I am. Let them change. I'm staying here. Right. You're going to come back to me. I had the amazing experience of being the director of writing for a school district right at the time that whole language.
Oh my gosh, that was a challenge.
Oh my God. So whole language changed the whole thing. I ate it, drank it, slept it. Went in, had teachers working with journals and thematic units and all of these things, and the teachers were like, get out of here,
leave me alone.
Leave me alone. These kids need to learn grammar. They don't need to read. They don't need to do all this other crazy thing. Just leave me alone. I'm not going to redo my bookshelves. And finally got them to do it, and we went back to basics. You know, so it's crazy. And so a lot of teachers have been burned, and they just feel that they're ready for change, but they don't need to change.
I don't know.
How do you get them to change?
Yeah, I don't know that it is the need to change more than what I call an emotional intelligence. If you think about self-awareness, reflection, self-management, change is difficult. Look at New Year's coming up, right? Everybody does all these new ideas, but then they don't change their habits because it's very hard.
I'm perfect. I don't need to change.
These resolutions sometimes don't work. It's like goal setting.
Fine, thanks. Leave me alone.
So you have to emotionally be ready and open-minded for change, and we talk about that a lot.
That's
about what pushes your buttons, what doesn't, and let it go.
And teachers are supposedly agents of change.
Correct.
These kids have got to learn how to change.
Correct.
And as I said, they're changing every 43 minutes.
Correct.
You're getting them in a new mind frame all the way through. They have English, and here they're learning how to be open And then for the next 43 minutes, they're doing math where it's yes or no. It's different. And it's a different frame of mind. And then they're in the gym doing square dancing or lifting weights or, and this is all in the course of one day.
And the students want to know, how do I apply what I learn? That's what I'm finding more and more
why
nowadays.
Why am I here?
Why am I here and why is this important? As opposed to,
it's huge.
Let me learn this and then get a grade, and that grade is the end-all, be-all of my career in school system. So I think that emotional intelligence of understanding that change is important, and here are phases to help you. Keep an open mind.
And that it's not really change, it's transition.
Correct. It's new ideas.
Yes,
I see it as a teachable moment.
It's simply, you don't throw away what you knew.
Right.
You transition it into the next stage.
Right.
And that's what it is. I mean, isn't that what life is?
Absolutely. Every day I'm looking for, what has this taught me today, right? I love that.
What did I learn today?
Correct.
And most of the time in the new me is just leave it alone.
Yeah.
You have to go day by day, understand what you learned yesterday, but live for today. And it's just important to do that.
Right. And the kids are looking, and I'm always going to call them kids, so I don't want to insult anybody who's 18 years old, but they're always going to be kids to us who work in education.
I have 45-year-olds who are kids
to you, so
they
you
come
get
to me
it.
and they go, Mr. Dacquino, remember me? I was in the third row, second seat.
You
and
get
I go,
it.
Yeah, except that you don't look like you did that.
I think as educators, we miss opportunities to talk to our students and children about, tell me, what do you feel you need? What aren't we doing? Here are the state regulations. They're set. They're the framework of what we do. But let's talk to our clients and find out what works and what doesn't.
See, one of the things, I worked with a lot of new teachers too. And it's interesting because we do have hindsight. After a while, we were where they were.
Yeah.
And we have to try to use some of what we learned to help them learn.
Correct.
Before they get burned.
Correct.
You don't always have to touch the hot stove to know it's hot. And there are things that teachers are doing that could be done so much easier. And we need consultants to help. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's a consultant. It's not your boss. It's someone who says, hey, try this. If this is not working, maybe you need to do this. And there are alternatives. There's so many different ways to do the same thing.
But do you feel that by bringing a consultant in, or when you did it, that it insulted the educator?
Absolutely,
right?
Especially the educators who didn't want to change. And the ones who said, hey, I'll prove it to you. When this person came in and said, from now on, when you walk into the room, you were to write your goal for that day's class on the board. Well, that lasted about 2 days.
Yeah.
So these people said, look, you made me change. You made me throw out all of my worksheets, and guess what? I need them now.
Right.
And you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
So it's very difficult.
Very
because
difficult.
a consultant is someone who is consulting with you to make your life better, not theirs.
And I think the challenge I have as a consultant, here's another one that just comes up as we're talking, is that many of the school counselors graduate from their master's program, and I'm an adjunct faculty member for 2 locations, 2 graduate programs in counseling, and I'm done. I learned it, I'm done. This is what I was told to do through the classroom. And when someone comes in and says, let's think about this process differently, it's a major effect on their minds and their routines.
Well, time is running short. I'll show you a huge revelation for me was I taught 6th grade for years. And then I was asked to teach 10th and 12th.
It's fun.
It's fun, except when I looked out there, my little 6th graders had mustaches.
Very good.
And to be able to see your students all those years later and see the people that you supposedly influenced and worked with is mind-boggling.
Pride and joy.
And it gives you a chance to see what you did or didn't do. Well, Dr. Harding, great news for you. Time's up. We have about 2 minutes. Any final words you want to say to these people?
Just believe in yourself. It's all about caring, knowing yourself, and moving forward. If you have an idea, Share
Yeah.
it. If you have a question, ask. Don't be embarrassed. It really is about belief.
And being a consultant doesn't mean you are the know-it-all.
No, I counsel with the heart.
Yes, and counseling simply means to help them be the best person
Correct.
they can be. And that's really important.
Absolutely.
It's not about you, it's about them.
It's all about them.
It's all about them. Well, it has been absolutely my pleasure. Every time I talk about education, my skin tingles a little bit because I did it for so many years and it was so much a part of me. And we don't work with students, we
Right.
work with children.
Children.
And we need to help those children be better adults.
Absolutely.
So therefore, when we work with teachers, we're working with the very essence of what those children need.
Agreed.
What a pleasure.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Remember, education is the key. We need to learn every day, whether we're children or adults. Thank you for being here.